I hope you're well and vaccinated soon. I'm Toby Gordon-Dichter. I'm a trustee and a director and daughter of Meelya Gordon, whose memory we're honoring tonight. Your interest here tonight shows what the library stands for: curiosity, compassion, and love of learning. You know, there's more than 15,000 school children in Philadelphia who don't have Wi-Fi at home, and that library helps them. So if at this time you can see your way to helping us anything special, we'd very much appreciate it. And while we're talking tech, take a second to find the Q&A function on your screen and post your questions there throughout the program. And what a program. You know how some smart people make you feel really smart and some smart people make you feel dumb? Well, the two people tonight, Eric Dyson and Jon Meacham, are people who always leave me feeling smarter and wiser and better informed. And tonight's program particularly will bring you greater understanding and a deeper awakening. So as cerebral as you may know Dr. Dyson to be from his erudite performances on MSNBC and his New York Times op-eds, this book's more heart than head, and different from his 20 other books about everything and everyone from Motown to Malcolm X, Katrina to Barack Obama. This book is not as much about Eric Garner and Breonna Taylor and a lot of people you don't know yet, and maybe you hadn't heard of, as it is to them. Long Time Coming reads like a love letter of apology to 5 who died at the hands of racism and police brutality. You'll read what Dr. Dyson calls the raw Black truth that Black folks must live with all the time. From cultural roots to Karens to cancel culture, you'll be fascinated and perhaps surprised by his perspective. His academic career at some of the best colleges of the country, and now at Vanderbilt, is all the more impressive when you know the backstory. Eric Dyson was born in 1958 in Detroit. He was considered a child prodigy, and as a young boy given a academic scholarship to a very prestigious prep school, which he soon left with an early awakening of a racial divide. And then as a high school graduate and teenage father, he worked any job he could to support his young family, and at age 19 became an ordained Baptist minister. From there, he went to Knoxville College as a freshman at age 21. He got his bachelor's degree magna cum laude from another college and a PhD in religion from Princeton University in 1993. Only a year later, he was a full tenured professor. That's pretty rare. And he's pretty rare, actually. And so is his companion, Jon Meacham. They're both historians, philosophers, media commentators, and frequent guests at this lecture series. So they must like us, and we sure like them. Jon Meacham's wonderful book, The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels, feels like a warm hug from 2018, as we recall his in-person author event at Parkway Central. So tonight, let's embrace what we have in being together in cyberspace and welcome Dr. Eric Dyson in conversation with Jon Meacham. Gentlemen, thank you and welcome back to the great Free Library of Philadelphia.
Thank you. All great things come out of Philadelphia. And so we're from constitutionalism and at this hour, the Reverend Dr. Dyson. There's a fantastic story that Ronald Reagan used to tell, which is that when he was in Hollywood and he would get a call from someone saying, we'd like you to come perform at our benefit, he would say, but I can't sing or dance. And they would say, we know, but you can introduce someone who can. My role tonight is simply to introduce the Reverend Dr. Dyson, my friend and someone I've admired for a long time. And I am at Vanderbilt now, and we have, it's a little like Bethlehem. We have a creche ready for him when he comes down in a couple of months. There's a star over the campus. There's a lot of excitement. We hope the whole Herod thing doesn't happen, but it's early yet. It's early. So honored to be here with my friend and remarkable public intellectual. I will just jump in, Michael, and say, what's been a long time coming?
Yeah, well, first of all, the incomparable Jack Benny, uh, Jon Meacham.
That- I consider that to be a compliment.
It's
Not everyone
absolutely,
would, but I do.
it's an absolutely a compliment. I didn't say Groucho Marx, though that would have been a compliment as well. But I'm so glad that Joe Biden gave you the night off because to hang out with me here, man, and to slum and to slouch with the ne'er do wells. Uh, but we all know that Jon Meacham owns any room in which he appears. So I'm glad to be in his shadow. It's still radiant over here because his brilliance is so concentrated. But you know, what's been a long time coming is the beginning signs of a reckoning with race. And, you know, it comes in fits and starts. It is shape shifting. It is episodic. But there's an undercurrent that continues to call us to responsibility and draw attention to its various incarnations. And for me, I think that what happened after May 25th, 2020, after George Floyd lost his life in that epic seizure of indifference, or at least sadistic disregard for his life, under the knee of Derek Chauvin, the former officer now about to stand trial in March for his murder. And so for me, that day when, you know, many white brothers and sisters said, you know what, enough is enough. We'd had asterisks assigned to certain of these events. You must have said something that was belligerent and provocative. No, he was actually laying there on the ground. You must have been running from the cops. Nope, not that either. You must have appeared as a dangerous phantom, at least in their imaginations, if not in the material realm. Not really, because 3 cops were stationed on his neck and his torso and his legs, and his mortally depressed column was further impressed by the vicious concentration of the knee of Chauvin on the neck of Floyd, and it deprived him of air. We had seen this movie before in Eric Garner. And so many white brothers and sisters said, no, no, you know, whatever we had before, whatever we thought before, hundreds of thousands swelled the numbers of protesters, which is why it is indeed the greatest protest collectively for social justice in American history, because a lot of white folk got involved. You can't sell a bunch of records if you're a hip hop star in the millions upon millions without white patronage. And you're not going to have the biggest protest movement in the history without a bunch of white folk and others saying, we're going to make common cause, forge connections, build a bridge to reasonable compact that allows us to say that we're going to try to live out the meaning of the creed of this nation. And so a lot of folk hit the street, and that was a long time coming. That kind of togetherness was a long time coming. That kind of conscious decision to reckon with race. Now, there's been the promise of reckoning, the threat of reckoning, the dangerous possibility lurking all around us that we would begin and not succeed, and so on. But this was a significant gesture, and one to be remarked on, and I think to be embraced.
Put this moment on a spectrum with Emmett Till, Birmingham '63, Pettus Bridge.
Right.
Where does this rank?
Right. I hesitate to comment on this since Mr. Meacham has written a book about the star, along with Amelia Boynton, of that Edmund Pettus Bridge appearance. And so he knows all too well and so intimately what happened there. Yeah, when we look at Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy extracted from his home and visiting with his relatives in Money, Mississippi, and because he had wolf whistled supposedly at a young white woman, Carolyn Bryant, and he didn't know the rituals, the practices of the South. He was a 14-year-old kid from Chicago, didn't know much about what was going on down there, even though Chicago is a suburb of Mississippi. If we look at the great patterns of the migration, he's down there. He gets pulled out of his house one night, the house of his Uncle Mose, taken, beaten, shot, you know, a cotton gin fan, 70 pounds tied around his neck, thrown into the Tallahatchie River. They fish him out. His mother says, "We will not have a closed casket funeral. I want the world to see the disfiguring impact of white supremacy on the face, the body, and the image, the reputation, and the lives of Black people." And so we didn't have Twitter back then. We didn't have social media, but we had Jet Magazine in the Black community. And word got around and images were stirred. And that image got global coverage because of her courage to allow the world to see what happened. From there, of course, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where the incalculable courage of Miss Boynton, John Lewis, and several other soldiers, absent Martin Luther King Jr. for that first leg, facing the brutal phalanx of law enforcement on horses, stampeding upon the future of America's conscience in Congress, but stampeding on his young body, beating him, and along with Jerome Smith of Corps, the most highly decorated soldier in terms of physical assault endured in his own body of mostly any civil rights devotee of the era. And that Edmund Pettus Bridge is representative of both the dying of a Confederate way and the revival, resurrection of a new possibility that was linked to an ancient past, where a president said that we've got to appeal to the better angels of our nature. We've got to make certain that we circulate our goodwill, and that the mystic chords of memory would carry us aloft to those precious places. Where do we put this then? George Floyd is in that range, is in that continuum, as Professor Meacham's question suggests, because it is a dynamic event that sparked an incredible movement that generated enormous empathy and concern, and hopefully some movement in the broader society toward the goals and aspirations that Black people have been struggling for a little bit over 400 years in this nation.
When did you think that George Floyd's murder would have this impact? Was it instantaneous? Was it Lafayette Square? What was the moment where you thought, this is coming?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, immediately, of course, we had literally seen this movie before. Eric Garner's, death, the tragic takedown by Staten Island cops, Daniel Pantaleo, asphyxiating him with a chokehold that is illegal and yet lethally applied to so many other Black necks. And so literally we had seen it before, and you would think, Chauvin, hey, did you see that video? And it doesn't turn out well, even for cops who think that they're above some kind of law. It doesn't often turn out well in these kinds of instances where you can't just get off scot-free. But he ignored that history, whether he knew it or not, we don't know. But we assume it was so well circulated that he had to have known that something similar had occurred. That kind of sadistic indifference was remarkable, but I didn't think, it would be something different. But when I saw white brothers and sisters, because this is a new thing, right? It's not that they were not always involved, they have been, but to the degree and with the determined insistence that they will show up this time, They're not going to do it by proxy. They're not going to do it by pocketbook. They're not going to do it by saying that, hey, we agree with you, but lay back. No, this was something different. And I think we can account for it by the fact that all of us, not all of us, but many of us were at home because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
So whereas a week before the pandemic, old people like me were remonstrating morally against our younger charges for having resorted to an iPhone when I'm sitting right here in the room. Pay attention to me right now. Well, we can no longer stay in the room. So the very technology that had been a bane to our existence, distracting us from the intimacy of exchange, now became the medium chosen by nature, God, or at least technology that allows us to talk to each other like we're doing, colleagues. But I've not yet seen you in the flesh at Vanderbilt. So that the virtual became a virtue that allowed us intimate space, doctors, lawyers, therapists, priests, and unfortunately and tragically, sometimes for the last time, people spoke to their loved ones through this medium. And so we were used to the very things that we had been so bothered by before, irritating, buffers and stuff. We were patient because, hey, this is all we have. And so when that image, those images flooded this medium, it hit us differently this time. Like we're used to watching our phones. Most of us are tuned in to our computers listening. And so I think it hit us differently. And I think the George Floyd death registered so palpably because a lot of white brothers and sisters also said, this is the pandemic. Are you up to those shenanigans now? And all the asterisks were removed and all the excuses gone. So then I knew, like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, Eric Garner was big, but this is over like across the globe. People are responding to this across the world. And the masses of bodies in America, I knew then, yeah, this is different. This ain't the same. And when you saw postings on social media, and people, you know, tend to disavow the symbolic, oh, those are symbolic gestures, or they say, oh, that's performative. Well, given what you do and I do, the redemptive character of performance is necessary. John Lewis is one of the greatest performers in the 20th century. Martin Luther King Jr. is a great performer. Hell, Bull Connor was a great performer. He was a buffoon linked in, but those performances changed America. So I'm not with those who disparage the character of performance. You need to regulate it. What is the theater of engagement? What are the parts and roles to be played? So I think it's serious. I think it's important that people who are allies show up, say things, post stuff, speak up, and say, I am with you, and it makes a difference. And I hadn't seen that kind of depth of penetrating into that marketplace of ideas that we share as American citizens that many white brothers and sisters don't necessarily always translate into an immediate empathy for the cause of Black people. And then to follow that up with action, that was big for me. And I thought it was, I said, this is different. This ain't the same.
Yeah. Whenever people say that's just symbolic, I'm reminded of the great Flannery O'Connor story when she's at a dinner party with Mary McCarthy in New York, right, and a bunch of lapsed Catholics, and they're going on about how the Eucharist is a great symbol. And O'Connor rose up and said, well, if it's just a symbol, then to hell with it. It's the center of existence for me.
Yes, yes, and, amen, amen.
You know,
amen.
So one, and I don't really want to say his name, Voldemort-like, but the incumbent president at the time, both, I would argue, historically exacerbated and helped make this kind of thing possible.
Yeah.
On the evil side,
right,
but also on the good. Right. So to talk a little bit about the context of 2020. To what extent is George Floyd's martyrdom, which I think is the right word, I'll defer to the ordained person. I'm an Anglo-Catholic, so we're still sentimental about holy orders. To what extent is his martyrdom did the vividness of the martyrdom and the reaction to it. To what extent do you think that was made possible by a broader sense of disgust with the then president?
Yeah, no, it's especially relevant. He was the backdrop against which these events unfolded. He was the fleshly canvas upon which was inscribed, either by graffiti or by Warholian imprint, a kind of, indentation and an impression that said, what this guy is doing is so wrong and so bad and so nefarious and so foul that we see more clearly now the stuff we used to dismiss. Oh, the good old liberal compact. We used to, oh, you hypocrites. Oh, can we have more of that hypocrisy, please? Because it was at least committed to trying to do something different. Whereas this president, unnamed, but maybe numerically identified, because he did bring a revolver like a 45 against so many people. And because of his epic badness, the colossal possibility of events resonated with us so powerfully because we felt there's something big going on here. This is not small. Because when a guy says there's no difference between neo-fascists and fascists and anti-Semites and, people who are fighting anti-Semitism, Black people and anti-Blackness, when there's no distinction, my God, then we're in bad areas of social engagement. And whatever you want to say about that guy, he brought it out. Now to his credit, if I can say it that way, he was the product, not the producer. And what's difficult for many people to see is that, although we're beginning to see it now with the lingering effect, even after he's out of office, is that he was produced by historical changes. He was produced by deeply entrenched beliefs. White supremacy didn't start with that guy. White nationalism didn't begin with him. He was a brilliant communicator. Yes, I can agree with people who say the lack of, mental power and sophisticated analysis, all that's true. But please don't dismiss the incredible genius of that guy's communication skills and to be able to galvanize, although to wretched effect, the masses of people who listen to him and to come within a hair's breadth again of getting reelected. Except in this case, he met his match with a guy who's been playing the long game, with a man who understands the intimate familiarity of hurt people with a desperation for empathy more than revenge. Mm-hmm. And so that is the backdrop against which unfolded all of the carnage and mayhem in the streets. And in one sense, we have him to thank for drawing such powerful contrasts, for making us understand who we truly are and forcing us to see there's some ugly stuff that we thought we had dealt away, but that is here. And, since I'm an old Baptist preacher, my Bible tells me that, hey, if you kick a demon out and you don't put something in its place, 7 worse are going to come and knock on your door and take up residence there. And so I think this was the 7 worst thing, the 7 worst kind of pedigree. And as a result of that, though, we were able to see things strikingly differently. And I would argue that the present occupant of that White House, whom we both love, let's just be real.
We can say his name.
The Reverend Dr. Professor Joseph Biden. And because he is all that, trust and believe. So here's a man who is the first to acknowledge he's not perfect, as opposed to I'm a stable genius. A man whose Catholic sensibilities lead him to an almost preternatural sense of guilt that works to the advantage of the opposition because he's so willing to at least consider the possibility I could be wrong. I might not have it right. And not only reaching across the aisle, but reaching across the way to people who ostensibly share same space with him. Doesn't mean he's not vigorous, because he'll give you a fight. Doesn't mean he doesn't have that Irish sensibility that gives him poetry and pugnacity in equal volume and able to prosecute on either front. But at the same time, we might not have appreciated who and what he was if not for the preceding example of such epic badness and tragic malevolence, that his decency was a redemptive character for the nation. So George Floyd Lang there was made possible by that unnameable force. And yet, because of that unnameable force, George Floyd's death circulated more broadly, resonated more powerfully, and gave us a North Star that we might not have been able to see had not the clouds of ambiguity been dismissed and the rank, ordinary hatreds that were unleashed by that figure had stalked the horizon.
I don't want to torture this metaphor too much, but I was in Washington yesterday with my daughter, 16 years old. And the Capitol, as you know, it's not just the Capitol grounds. The lockdown goes way down the hill and all the way back to the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court, with fences, razor barbed wire, and armed soldiers about every 75 yards or so. And I had a genuine sense, as someone who spends his time trying to find virtues in the constitutional structure that came out of Philadelphia, embarrassed that we were seeing that. And that this was the country that her father spends a lot of time trying to act as an attorney for. The other image here, and this is why I don't want to torture the metaphor, is it is a fence. It's not a wall. And it's going to come down. But the things can get through fences. And so I'm curious what you think about both the origins, present, and future of white supremacy and white Christian nationalism.
No, it's beautifully set up there, man. And you're right. A fence is not a barbed wire, temporary fixture. And a fence is not a wall. And so porous is not the metaphor, but open spaces through which things slip that have the potential to elevate and make us better. But when we think about the sources, both present and in the future, of that will to white supremacy, part of it is generated out of a refusal to see that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, that you're on the same ship, my brothers and sisters. And if we're sailing and you're tearing a hole in the floor because you're thirsty for vengeance, you're going to sink yourself too. And this is what Dr. King, at his best, tried to remind America, or to tell them for the first time in many instances. Remind, because he could have hearkened back to the Confederacy and what happened in the Civil War. But his point was, white supremacy will destroy America, not just Black people. You do know that it will undermine your democracy, and not just African people in America. So he's in jail in Birmingham, 63. And his jailer, says to him, Dr. King, you know that the quest for integration is wrong. And he says, no, it's right. And they go back and forth. And then when he stops to ask the guy, so how much money do you make? And when he told him, Dr. King basically said, hell, you need to be out here marching with us because you are intimately yoked to us, the overlords, the captains, the big shots, the people who thump you in the chest daily, who take great joy and pleasure in your demise, don't love you either. And Du Bois in 1935 in Black Reconstruction talked about white people being paid, working class white people, being paid the psychological wage of whiteness, he said. And that is a coin of the realm. We'll pay you, at least you're not Black. That's no compensation for lack of health care. That's no compensation for white life being under real assault. The New York Times a year and a half ago, began to talk about the real threat to certain varieties and classes of white people whose mortality was becoming even more stark and even more naked, right? We know that life expectancy was lopped off a bit because of 2020 and COVID, but these other forces predating COVID showed that there were some things afoot. And what King was saying is that white supremacy is bad for the nation in the same way liberation for Black people is great for everybody, right? Should we remind ourselves that, as you know better than any of us, that in that fight in 1964, when LBJ, that so-called redneck from Texas, is sitting in his roost, knowing that he is ruled over the Senate, and he knows it like the back of his hand and the inside of his intuition. And some of the senators said, hey, I know how we'll sink this bill. We'll hook it up with the women question, and it'll sink it, and they won't vote for it. And what happened? They voted for it. So not only did we get the Civil Rights Bill, oh my God, we got Title IX. What's good for Black people is good for America. And King understood that. But what's bad for Black people is horrible for the nation. We are not simply the proverbial canaries in the coal mine. So that, yes, you may think our fragile lungs from the dust of West Virginia or the virus that floods the entire nation is bad for us first and foremost because of certain conditions. It will eventually decimate the entire population, as it has. So white supremacy is a poor index of the strength and vitality of any culture. It is the explicit expression of surrender to a form of bigotry that is self-defeating. And so now and in the future, as long as white resentment is the predicate for American democratic energy, it is self-defeating. Those souls at the Capitol, those insurrectionists, those terrorists, those bigots, and a bunch of other stuff, right? It's interesting. Colin Kaepernick occasions such vehement denunciation because he's bending his knee on a gridiron peacefully. I just want to make a symbolic gesture that is extremely important. Thank you, Flannery. Powerful, along with Roland Barthes and maybe Marshall McLuhan. It's extremely, and Irving Goffman, it's extremely important and powerful, so much so that he is read as a traitor to America in a way that a guy waving a flag, a banner of bigotry through the most sacred civic space in the nation, with the support of the unmentionable, unnamed figure in the most hallowed hall of American politics, the Oval Office, reinforcing it. So when we do away with that, when we challenge that, and when we challenge white supremacy, we are really strengthening the wherewithal of the country in terms of its democratic energy, small d.
Right. I'm going to ask you one more, and then we'll go to the better questions that have been sent in by our friends in Philadelphia. Talk a little bit about the next act. Where does this reckoning go?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Yep, that's a great question. Let me start by telling you what it doesn't look like. I'm a Black man, been one for all the 62 years I have drawn breath on this earth, and I abhor the forms of hatred, prejudice, bigotry, racism that have marred my people. I was a young child leaving Detroit, going to visit my mother's home in Alabama, my daddy's home in Georgia, wondering why we couldn't stop like everybody else was, extracting a mason jar from its niche beneath the car and relieving ourselves, or eating out of a brown paper bag lodged inside a box chicken that paled in comparison to the hot meals that were being enjoyed by people up and down dotting the highway. And once stopping and my mother finally giving in to me, I was persistent even then. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, Meacham, let me come to Vanderbilt. Okay, come on, come on. So my mother stops. We go in. And the man says, in Tennessee, he says, we don't serve niggas here. Nashville, isn't it ironic? Ironic that I'm now in Nashville, well, at least symbolically. And I asked my mother, what's a nigga? What? She says, don't tell your father. Because if you tell your father, you know what will happen. Yes, of course, his manhood, his sense of protection of his family is involved. He goes in, something happens. He either hurts that person, then they call the police, and then they kill him. So silence is what we had to enjoy between ourselves to nurture a secret that the release of which could harm my family materially, not just spiritually. So I'm saying all that to say, I hate that word. I hate what it represents. I hate what it means. However, when I hear a young Nashville singer, Morgan Wallen, and he's used the N-word, people say, oh my God, he used the N-word. I say, really? Whoa, boy, you can't be that dumb in 2020, 21. Come on, bro. Come on. Wait till I get there. I'll hook you up. We'll talk. What's up? And then I saw the tape on TMZ. And he did say what they said he said, but not how they said he said it, right? He wasn't talking to a black person. He's speaking to his group. He's drunk. And he's not using N-I-G-G-E-R, he's N-I-G-G-A. So he evinces some intimate familiarity with the transformation of that term among Black people that signifies a lighter camaraderie among ourselves. Now, as a white guy, you don't have access to that. So still wrong. However, losing his career, his record company drops him, his agents drop him. Wait, what happened to, I effed up, I messed up, it's wrong, but can we redeem the guy? Can we talk to him? Can we restore him? He made one mistake. Now, unless he had a history where he said it 50 times or 20 times and repeated offender, you mean to tell me he said this and there is no mercy, there is no forgiveness, there's no, now hold him accountable. I mean, if you want to really punish him, make him talk to me. Oh my God, no, just drop me, please, right? Or better yet, sit down with me and Meacham both. Oh my God, you mean the white guy is getting deeper into my grits than the black guy? Yeah, that's what we're going to do for you. But here's the point. I cannot agree with cancel culture. I cannot, for the life of me, help but believe that cancel culture is white supremacy in other clothing. Zero tolerance is not a liberal conception. It is a right-wing conservative insistence on absolute purity that is the enemy of complex and nuanced humanity. And dadgummit, I'm a preacher. And God bless him. I'm not trying to defend this young man because look, he did a horrible thing and it was wrong. But can we talk to him? Can we believe in restorative justice? Can we talk to him? The governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, stupid thing he did, blackface. Don't act like he's the only white guy to do it. Please stop. Is it wrong? Of course. Is it horrible? Yes. And he was a physician. Oh my God, what were you doing? Dressing up for the surgery? You wanted to identify with the black faces you were cutting on? What up? I don't know. But here's the point. Was it horrible? Yep, tragic. But losing your job? So when they called me from Virginia, They may have been surprised. I said, no, nothing better than a white guy who knows he screwed up, knows he owes black people his future because they stood for him. Because the older black people were like, bruh, come on, stop. We get what's going on here. And he has done remarkable things, having stayed in office. Finally, Joseph Biden. I don't deny records. I don't pretend that Joe Biden didn't do what he did, didn't say what he said. It's on record. You can see him saying it. You can see the vigor with which he said it. Did he grow? Yeah. Did he evolve? Yeah. From a guy talking about busing, and don't act like he was the only white guy who was upset with busing. And by the way, when he turned to his own staff and said, maybe I have some unconscious bias, he checked himself against black people on his staff to make sure that I'm doing what I'm doing and called me on it and gave them carte blanche, pun intended. So here's a guy then who stood for 8 years with a black president, the first one. And even more vigorously than that black president, he sought to beat down people who were doing the wrong thing. And now look at him. Have you ever heard a president in his inaugural address say the words white supremacy or systemic racism? I dare you. I wait. No, you ain't. So my point is that what we can't do is do that. What we can do, what reckoning looks like, the intimate everyday spaces, the ordinary unsexy stuff. 8 months ago, many white people for the first time fell in love with black people. No judgment, no judgment. You fell in love with black people for the first time. Now, we were dating then, we did a lot of stuff. It was Valentine's Day. I love you. Put a black box on Instagram. Oh my God, look at the love. 8 months later, where are we? We're in the everyday ordinary phase where unsexy ordinary acts embody love. Stop putting the toilet paper from the outside in and put it on the inside out. Stop leaving the toilet seat up, Jon Meacham. I almost drowned last night. Are you pushing the toothpaste from the top and not the bottom? Who's taking the kids? How do we pay attention to paying the bills? How do we share resources? My point is that's what love looks like racially. That's what reckoning looks like. Corporations, businesses, universities are paying attention to the rituals, the mores, the folkways, the practices, and the habits that they nurture inside of their culture. That's what it looks like. And if we are to have a chance to make America a greater nation, then we will do it that way.
What do your friends and colleagues who are concerned about these issues, how do they react to your views on the cancel culture?
Oh, well, all of them ain't happy. They're not, but when I say to them, but are we going to actually do what was done to us? Are we like you absolute zero tolerance? We all get killed by that, right? We're all hurt by that. That was deployed initially as a check on Black mobility and progress. How can we justify that? And then they start listening. And I say, because you're the canceler today, you're the cancelee tomorrow. It ain't gonna take long. You're not righteous enough. You're not smart enough. You're not on the right side of history enough. You're not, and fill in the blanks. Yep. And so initially resisting, especially younger people, and I get it, because cancel culture, I said, that's a lynch mob. I said, I'd rather take my chances on a broken down, rickety system of justice than go onto internet. And as Margaret Atwood says, once you begin to adjudicate justice on the internet, the lynch mob shows up. This is what they did to us in jail. I don't care he's going to jail. I don't care he's going to court. We're going to put him in court. We're going to lynch him. And so you show up on Twitter, 100,000 people, 50,000 people. Wrong. You've been judged. No countervailing evidence. Nobody else weighing in like, hey, can we look at continuum? Do we have to make Al Franken Harvey Weinstein?
Yeah.
Is Aziz Ansari really the same as what's going on with the rape? I mean, we got to make distinctions. And so then they at least began to say, yep, there's a bigger tradition. And if we believe in restorative justice, it can't be conveniently done. It can't just be when, oh, it favors us. Restorative justice means we restore human beings. And the best of the Black tradition of which I'm a part, I realize there are others, but the one of which I'm a part, the arm I'm involved with, has always been about redeeming the culture, redeeming the nation, making certain that the possibility of restoration, of salvation, however that looks to you, comes to the nation. And it can't be done with that kind of absolutist, that kind of cancel impulse that to me is a cancer.
Fabulous, thank you. Some questions from folks.
Close this door.
What do you believe to be the role of the artist in these times?
Mm-hmm.
And is it enough to create dangerously, or should the expectation be something more?
The artist, yeah. Look, art is important. Art is powerful. It reaches people even more than a Jon Meacham book. And that's hard to imagine.
I know.
That's very hard to imagine.
It's very hard to imagine.
It's hard to imagine, right?
Struggle to imagine, though. Struggle.
Joe Biden, Oprah Winfrey, both love Jon Meacham. Come on. Come on. Come on. Look at that range, bro.
All right.
So it's even hard, but music, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Marvin Gaye, Beyonce, Jay-Z, Taylor Swift. I mean, are you telling me Taylor Swift doesn't have a hell of an impact? What about Dolly Parton saying, look, I love you, Nashville, for wanting a statue of me, but wait till I'm dead. Dolly Parton, we can't even love you anymore. Stop it. Stop that.
Now there'll be two statues.
Come on, bro. Come on. And you're one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century, bar none. Like, bar none. You write Jolene and I Will Always Love You on the same day. Get out of my face. Stop it. You're ridiculous. But when you hear the power of art, God forgive me for my brash delivery, but I remember vividly what these streets did to me. Imagine me allowing you to nitpick at me, portray me like a pickaninny, a contraction of pickaninny, Jay-Z. Bin Laden been happening in Manhattan back then, back when police was counted a black man. So there's something immediate and powerful and stirring that can happen in art. A piece of music played at the opera, words enunciated clearly in German or Italian, or words that are said subtly and powerfully, that can make a difference. A piece of photography, a snatch of visual art, all of these things are extremely important and can succeed where even explicit political efforts fail, or the impulse towards social justice. Better to see them together. That's why Martin Luther King Jr. would appear with Harry Belafonte, would appear, believe it or not, with Charlton Heston, who was at the March on Washington, right? Before he, after playing Moses, he figured he'd follow up and be a savior of a different sort. So when you think about art coming together to say something powerful, right? I mean, still, I'm 62 years old. I remember being at the drive-in and the opening words of the greatest American film ever made. I believe in America. America's made my fortune. And then the first sight of the great Brando sitting there. Why didn't you call me first? I mean, that art, that power, that ability to slip past all kinds of resistances, even, and I know it's not popular, even think about a guy like Clint Eastwood. I shouldn't like Clint Eastwood. I shouldn't dig Clint Eastwood. He's horrible. He's talking to a chair. He thinks it's a black man. Come on, Clint. He created parts of racially neutral, problematic stereotypes of blackness, but he's also provided opportunities to engage in serious analysis of those very stereotypes, hired black people, used jazz in his movies, made a film on Charlie Parker, and has tried to engage with the American songbook and its stories with a kind of vigor that exposes the underside of its flaw and the possibility at the top of what it can become. So art is extremely important and extremely powerful.
Going one step back on the cancel question.
Mhm,
Very
mhm.
good point about, particularly given your soon-to-be geographic move.
Mhm.
Do you feel the same way about the removal of Confederate statues?
No, that's not cancel culture. That's the unnamable's conception of cancel culture, right? Because from the powerful, cancel culture looks like, oh, you're shutting me up from talking my racist talk. You know, it's the same way when they talk about PC. Now I believe the PC exists, but a lot of the PC discourse was allow me to continue to be the bigot I am without having any checks and thank you. So no, that ain't what that's a misuse of the word cancel culture. Oh, it's cancel culture. Look at what you're trying to do. You know, when Howley and these other senators are trying to justify their spineless, feckless, obsequious deference to a power that they bow before, and yet they should stand up and find a spine. That ain't what I'm talking about. So when we talk about dotting the landscape of civic society, of the physical geography of the nation, there is an implicit agreement that those represent us as a nation. That ain't cancel culture. Put it in a museum. Don't cancel it. Reassign it. Give it a different place. And let's talk about it then. But the Confederate flag should not be flying as part of the banner of Mississippi, the last state to finally succumb. So no, that's not the same thing at all. And by the way, I've never gone by one of those statues and they're going, little Johnny, let me teach you about the conflicted history of the Confederacy as forces of bigotry fought against forces on the move against them. I ain't seen that, dog. I ain't never seen no conversation like that. Put it in a museum. Let's move on.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I proposed this test in a Times piece 3 years ago, maybe right after Charlottesville, 4 years ago, that the first step, and I'm not going to tell a school what to do or a church what to do, but if you're on public property, you have to answer, the first question you have to answer is, were you part of a more perfect union? And if you wanted to end the union, then you don't belong on land that is protected by that union.
I'm not sure if you don't understand that, but it's pretty clear to me.
Yeah,
As with the Capitol, dragging that banner of bigotry through the Capitol, the grounds upon which you detested the expression of a democracy you hated and you seceded from. So yeah, dog, you don't get a chance to call the rules. If you are the Lakers and you lose to the Celtics, you don't determine what the championship looks like. It just doesn't happen.
Our mutual friend Richard Plepler's father had a great line, which was, "If I have to explain it to you, I can't." It's just
that's it.
You know,
that's Yogi Berra. That's Yogi Berra, brother. That's Yogi Berra.
Exactly. How do you think the Black Lives Matter movement could go forward from here?
Well, to keep the pressure up, keep thinking about what it means to have Black life to matter. Also concede the fact that in one sense, the assertion of the mattering of Black life should have been the propedeutic, as Immanuel Kant would have called it, the introductory gesture of Black power, of Black self-determination. We kind of got it in reverse, right? Oh, so while we're getting all this power and we're trying to tell you what it is, I see what it is. Y'all don't believe that the life even matters. So if we don't settle that philosophical argument, it's not a philology in a Nietzschean sense, but dadgummit, it's basic Webster dictionary. So it's extremely important to make that point time and again in as many ways as possible, including within certain Black circles, where all Black lives don't seem to matter as much as all Black lives should. Part of the internalized refusal to acknowledge the meaning of Blackness and the mattering of Blackness, you're gay, you're trans, you're bisexual. I was preaching in a Black church. A woman came up to me and says, you know, you're going to hell. Like literally, she told me this after service. I said, did Jon Meacham send you? Who are you? who are you? She says, you know what I mean, right? I didn't say the Meacham part, but I said, really? Because I said, I talked to Jesus this morning. He ain't told me I was going to hell. I said, I guess I don't have to watch my cholesterol then, huh? She was pissed. So she says, you know what I mean? She says, you know why you're going to hell? I said, ma'am, I'm not going to lie to you. I know 25 reasons why I should go to hell. but I'm curious about the ones you know, because my phone is locked. Nobody's gotten into my library. So damn, what do you know? Am I that sloppy? And she says, you said that God made gay people. I said, oh my God. And you think I'm going to hell? And you're a polytheist? You think there's a God for gay people and one for straight? What, did God take Wednesday off? And says, look, this creation stuff is a pain. I need a break midweek. The hump is come and I'm done. And then that's when gay people got made. Oh my God, when God took a day off. I said, either God made everybody or God ain't made nobody. It ain't no in between. Either everybody or nobody. So when people tell me, well, God put Obama in office. Oh, so what happened with the Trump stuff? Or when people tell me Trump was ordained by God. Well, what about Obama? What? God said, I'm a weigh in on this presidential election, but I'm gonna take this one off. This is what I believe. God says, these are the principles. I want people who are just and fair and make sense in office. You people choose what that looks like. So don't blame that on God. Ernest Becker had a notion of anthropodicy, not theodicy. Theodicy, Jonathan Swift, Jonathan Pope, whoever, that how do you justify God's ways before men? Theos, God, dictates justice. He said it's anthropodicy. Don't be blaming God. If the plane falls out the sky, what's the engineer's role, not the Almighty's role, right? So for me, we have to look at it that way in terms of race as well. So yeah, I think Black Lives Matter is important. I think it's lovely and poetically just that two queer women and a straight woman founded that movement, and it's become even bigger. Speaking of what, of an avatar or a symbol, Black Lives Matter, that's the perfect slogan. It's a hashtag. It's a philosophical principle. It's George Berkeley-like. If a tree falls in the forest, who's there to hear it? That's the Dysonian interpolation. So the point is, Black Lives Matter is an argument in its own assertion that has to be taken seriously. So continue to talk about social injustice, speak about structural inequity, talk about the ways in which Blackness has metastasized across American culture and the degree to which it's been demonized and pathologized at the same time. Those are the areas, healthcare, education, business, wealth creation that are extremely important right now.
I want to ask you for a benediction here, playing on this question. I suspect that the folks associated with the Philadelphia Free Library don't need a lot of homiletic energy to work toward realizing the Jeffersonian assertion of equality. Mm-hmm. That said, what can we the people do to make somebody, if there could ever be another Dyson down the years, which God probably thought, maybe one is plenty. That's also right.
Notice the humor there, people.
I made him on Thursday. Jesus, I came back, to work on Thursday, and here this is what I did. But just on the possibility there might be somebody in 50 years looking back at this book and your argument about this moment. What can we do to show that you were right, that this was the beginning of a genuine reckoning and not a seasonal one? Right.
Well, besides having one of the greatest public intellectuals of our times engage me in conversation after getting the day off from Biden, the point is that proving that I was right, because we engaged very clearly and very honestly the tap source, the tap root of our weakness and fragility. That the things we didn't do so well, we were interested in and curious about how we got better. Because the strengths are going to be stronger. We have to feed them. We have to nurture them. We have to, flex those muscles. But it's the vulnerabilities that are especially notorious in sapping the strength of any great empire, nation, group of folk, ethnos, state that has been generated. So if in 50 years people say, he was right, that you took a look at the stuff you didn't do so well so you could do better the stuff you do well already. Like, that was a sign of your strength. The willingness to talk to somebody else who disagrees with you, not hate them, not beat them down, not give up your particular viewpoints. You know, as Richard Rorty said, don't have your mind so open. Don't be so open-minded. Your brains fall out. Come on, keep them in there. We can agree, but we don't have to have a bunker mentality. And if we were able to gently and convivially and with amiability look the other person in the eye and say, I agree with you, disagree with you, but can we talk to negotiate a compact that makes us stronger in the long run? That's why I stand tooth and nail against cancel culture, because cancel culture eradicates that. Are you telling me that if LBJ were alive today, he wouldn't be canceled? If Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, he would be canceled because of the way in which his own particular weaknesses, LBJ's weaknesses, John F. Kennedy's weaknesses, and a bunch more would play out. So in an atmosphere of looking at, being introspective about, and curious on the things that we don't do well, the things that make us weaker, the things that challenge us, if we're willing to at least open our minds to take them on, I will have felt vindicated in those 50 years.
And the people said, amen.
My
friend Michael Eric Dyson, who, like Robert Penn Warren, gets 3 names, which I think is a fascinating thing. You know, you either, if you're going to be great, you got to have 1 name or 3. Cher, Madonna, Michael Eric Dyson. My friend, thank you. Thank you to Toby and to the library, and we'll see you all in person as soon as we can, safely. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
and buy lots of copies of the book.
Bless you, my man. Thank you so very much. I appreciate you so kindly, my man.
You see.